Coming up on Windows Weekly, Paul and Mary Jo are in the same physical space. They're partying out in Las Vegas, and we'll talk about should Bill Gates step down, that unified Windows store, Surface news, and a whole lot more.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Windows Weekly is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott and Mary Jo Foley, episode 331, recorded October 3rd, 2013, Sewage as a Service. This episode of Windows Weekly is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create your own professional website or online portfolio. For a free trial and 10% off, go to squarespace.com and use the offer code Windows10. And by Audible.com. To download a free audiobook of your choice, go to audible.com/windows. It's time for Windows Weekly. This is the show where we take a long, hard look at Microsoft and ask, what did you do this week? What exactly have you done? Leo Laporta's on vacation. He'll be back next week. I'm Ayaz Akhtar. You might have seen me on Tech News Today. You might have seen me on Windows Weekly last week and the week before that. But this is my last guest hosting bit for a while on this show. And because of that, to celebrate, Paul and Mary Jo both went to Las Vegas so they could go to actually the IT Dev Connections conference in Las Vegas. Let's welcome them. They switched sides because in the conference room, they're actually in the same room right now. Not in this room, but in Las Vegas. So if they look at each other, they're actually looking at each other the right way. So I'm going to go to Paul first. Paul, how drunk are you right now?
The weird thing is I'm actually much closer to her than that video suggests. And that door that you see behind me is, in fact, the same.
It's the same door?
Door, yeah.
I can't wait for guest stars to walk through it.
It's like the Matrix.
So Mary Jo, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
All right, so we're going to talk about Windows things, Microsoft things, because that's what this show does. If you haven't caught that by the lower third or these guys' beats on the web, you know that Paul does that whole Win Super Site thing and Mary Jo all about Microsoft. Let's talk about that whole Bill Gates story that popped up this week. Reuters was reporting that 3 investors who own less than 5% of the company, or maybe more than 5% of the company, they want Bill Gates away from Microsoft. Where do we start on this one?
Well, first we should start on the fact that this is a completely unsourced story from what we can tell. They didn't name who the 3 investors are who supposedly want Bill Gates out, or didn't really talk about how possible or probable this would be. So, you know, it's possible there are some institutional investors who own probably under 1% of Microsoft who want him out. But Bill Gates owns 5% of Microsoft, and Steve Ballmer owns 4% of Microsoft. I think it's going to be tough to just simply oust them from the board of the company that Bill Gates created.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to try to oust him in any way. I think it's more along the lines of maybe he would leave voluntarily. And to be fair, is with regards to his holdings in Microsoft, there's a certain percentage of his shares that leave the company every single year, and I guess it goes towards his philanthropic endeavors. Yeah. So the plan for him is that by, I think, 2018, he won't have any Microsoft stock anymore. And I'm kind of hoping it doesn't stick around that long. But this, to me, is just kind of a common sense thing. There are going to be people who want Bill Gates to step down because they feel that Microsoft can't really change until he's gone. And then, of course, there are going to be those who just sort of trade on the tradition and, you know, the history of him, you know, obviously co-founding and being part of Microsoft.
Now, Gates himself, he's on that special committee to determine a new CEO, Steve Ballmer, obviously leaving pretty soon. And the report was claiming that because of Gates' presence and his ability to, basically they were saying there was this not due influence. The influence that Gates has is far greater than his actual shareholdings, which I find to be ridiculous considering he, I don't know, co-founded the company. So what do you guys make of that idea that because he will be on the committee, that will stop the next leader? Because it just seems like, it seems a little strange to me.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I do think that whoever comes in as CEO is going to have to deal with the Gates problem, you know, if he doesn't leave. I mean, he is an ever-present presence at Microsoft, and probably someone who has more influence than you might imagine, despite the fact that he's not really working day-to-day at Microsoft anymore. I mean, I think he has had a big say in the technical strategy for the company. and the board and by extension Bill Gates support the current strategy of devices and services, which a lot of people are starting to question. So I would hope that whoever comes in as CEO, however it happens, with or without Gates, has the ability to make the changes that may or may not be needed at Microsoft without any, meddling from on high, in either direction.
I saw somebody retweeted this week. It was Brad Silverberg, who is one of the really key people at Microsoft back in the Windows 95 days. He was running the IE team, and he said on Twitter, if you are an investor in Microsoft and you don't like Bill Gates as the chairman, you shouldn't be an investor in Microsoft. It's pretty much true, right? I mean,
well, but he's old school Microsoft too.
He's old school, but yeah. I mean, if we were talking about this week at the conference, if Bill Gates isn't on the board, who on that board becomes the tech person who knows what's going on at Microsoft?
Right.
If you look at the composition of the Microsoft board, there are not a lot of tech people on there. John Thompson, who used to work at IBM and Symantec, is on there. Mm-hmm. He's the one leading the search for the new CEO, actually. And after that, it's not a lot of tech people. So you would think on a board of a company that wants to be a devices and services company, you would like to have some tech people on there, right?
Yeah. And actually, the call for Gates to step down, I mean, should that happen, I think that the other half of that equation is that most of or all of the existing board needs to step down as well, because it's not just Gates, right? It's the board.
Yeah. And the likelihood of that is probably zero.
Next to nothing.
Wouldn't you want some kind of continuity? If you have an outgoing CEO, you have a complete management shakeup in general when it comes to the divisions. You've got like the head of operating systems as opposed to the head of Windows. If you're going to shift everything at the same time, how could you have any continuity? It's not like Microsoft is struggling as a company. Its market share might be dropping slightly, but they're making money hand over fist. And the biggest problem about them has been stagnation. That's the problem with a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar company. It seems a little.
Well, you know what though? There's still part of Microsoft that aggressively wants to grow and be part of the discussion, to be a leader in various spaces. And I think the feeling is that Microsoft is not a leader in those markets that they want to be leaders in, the kind of consumer-oriented businesses, online services, and devices. And that, yes, Microsoft has this big and probably sustainable business around enterprise and servers and server-like services. But, they want to be, for whatever reason, they want to be like Google in some ways. They want to be like Apple in some ways. They want to be more vertically integrated from a business perspective, but they also want to be respected and beloved by individuals, which I think by and large they really are not for the most part.
They want to be loved. That's all anybody wants.
They just want to be loved.
Right?
The money doesn't mean anything, Ayaz, if you're not in love.
They're not loved. They got respect, but there's nothing without the love. You're right. Now, Paul, you got a piece up there on your super site for Windows, winsupersite.com, rethinking Ray Ozzie. Someone needs to say, Ray Ozzie was right. What are you talking about?
So Ray Ozzie came to Microsoft as part of the acquisition of Groove. And but a year after that, he became the chief software architect at Microsoft when Bill Gates stepped down from that role. I think that's about right on the timing. Mm-hmm. So this would have been probably 2004, 2005-ish timeframe. And Groove was integrated into Microsoft in actually very meaningful ways. In fact, if you look at Windows 8.1 right now, the most recent version of their client operating system, the sync technology that they use for SkyDrive that's built into the OS is an extension of that Groove technology that Microsoft purchased, which was Ray Ozzie's company. And of course, Ray Ozzie is best known for both Groove and for Notes, and he worked at actually VisiCalc and Lotus before that. Ray Ozzie is a Bill Gates era, tech visionary. And the thought was, if there's anyone on this earth that could succeed Bill Gates as chief software architect at Microsoft, it would be Ray Ozzie. The interesting thing about him is that he tried to change Microsoft's culture and strategy from day one, before, in fact, he was even chief software architect. And he wrote memos like Gates has done, and we've seen some of the famous Gates memos, the internet tidal wave and so forth, where he kind of steps forward and says the direction needs to change. There's this new trend occurring, and we need to be leading in that space. And Ray Ozzie tried to do the same thing, but of course, Ray Ozzie is not Bill Gates. And this goes back to that earlier discussion around Gates and the impact that guy has on this company. Gates, just by uttering something, can change the direction of Microsoft. A guy like Ray Ozzie, even though he's perhaps just as technical and certainly was in a position of power at Microsoft, was unable to change Microsoft. And so some of his internal memos are available on his own website now. And they were public, I think, anyway, before this. But he wrote 2 big memos that basically prophesized, and to use one word, the coming internet services wave, and then also the devices wave. And if you think about Microsoft's current strategy around devices and services, he basically suggested that Microsoft take this very path. But he did it in 2005. And in 2005, Microsoft was busy trying to make Longhorn happen. They had already canceled the Longhorn project, and they had turned it into Windows Vista, which was a very quick release that occurred over the next year. But they were still really heavily involved in PCs. And if you think back to what Steve Ballmer just said about his biggest regret during his time at Microsoft, was that during this very time period, that all he cared about was computers and PCs and getting Vista out the door. He didn't pay enough attention to phones and to devices. And this is exactly the kind of thing that Ray Ozzie was preaching. And so I can't remember the impetus for this, but I went back and started looking at what he had written recently. And I've been meaning to write this for a while, but I finally wrote up something quick this week. And 2 major memos, one from 2005, one from 2008 or 10, I can't remember, maybe 2010.
10, yeah.
Where had Microsoft followed his advice with the alacrity that they did earlier for the Internet tidal wave when they embraced the Internet and made Internet Explorer and all that kind of stuff, we wouldn't be having a lot of the conversations we're having right now about the future of Microsoft and what's going on and what are they doing. I think. I mean, it's obviously impossible to tell for sure. But I do, it's very clear that he was basically right about the way things should have gone, and now Microsoft is retroactively trying to go down that very path. It's interesting that they adopted it years late.
I remember when Ray Ozzie left, and I went back and looked at his original memo at the time and looked at what he said on his parting memo. And surprisingly, there were a lot of things that did get implemented that he wanted.
Yep.
But when he left, there were a lot of rumors about him not really getting along with Steven Sinofsky, who was running Windows.
Which, in retrospect, says a lot about the guy as well.
Yeah. And so, I think remembering back, we just mentioned Brad Silverberg. Brad Silverberg and Jim Alchin back in the old days, Windows 95 days, had a real difference of opinion about should you bet on the internet or should you bet on Windows? Right. And Microsoft bet on Windows, and Brad Silverberg left.
Right? Jim Alchin won, yeah.
Right,
Yep.
And now you had Ray Ozzie saying you should bet on services, and Steven Sinofsky saying we should bet on Windows, and Ray Ozzie left, right? So it kept kind of is history repeating itself in a way.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of ways you can judge the Steve Ballmer years, and I've written about some of the ones that I think are a little bit more positive, but some of the decisions that were made, some of the decisions that were not made, some of the people who left the company, some of the people that were put in positions of power that maybe shouldn't have been, are all factors in this broader problem that we tend to go back to again and again for whatever reason these days. I look at Ray Ozzie, he was right there in the middle of all of it. I mean, he was there from about 2004 to 2010. It was kind of a pivotal time period, and not talking about stock prices and all that kind of stuff that he would have nothing to do with. He really foresaw this move that is now very much underway, and not with Microsoft. Google is a huge player in online services, obviously, as are lots of smaller players, Dropbox and so forth, but also a huge player in the devices space, the biggest, really, in many ways. And Apple, of course, is huge in devices and not quite as big in online services, but you can see what they're doing around that as well.
It was funny. Paul ended his Ray Ozzie piece saying, someone owes this guy a beer. And Ray Ozzie actually answered you on Twitter, right? And said, I think it's clear somebody owes me a lot of beers or something.
No, he goes, I learned something. First he said, thank you, and I, as I was telling these guys here earlier, I mean, I write something like this about an individual. It never occurs to me that he'll ever read it or care about it, or, I don't know why I don't think of that kind of thing. But, he thanked me for writing this, but he also said, he said, it's very clear to me that I'll never be wanting for beer again. And I think there are a lot of guys inside and outside of Microsoft. He still lives in the Seattle area, I believe, who wanted things to go differently for the company. And it's worth saying, Microsoft is a huge company. And we tend to think of it as this thing, like it's some single entity, which it isn't. There are people at Microsoft who obviously are very smart and care a lot and want to change the world and want things to be better. and they really just can't have the impact that they should have because it's so huge and convoluted. And a lot of those people, their voices were not heard, right, during this era, and they believed what Ray Ozzie was saying and wanted Microsoft to do this and didn't want them to focus so solely on Windows as they've done. But as we've said a lot too, it's hard to walk away from easy money. Windows is like a cash register. Every time you open it, there's like a bucket of money sitting there, and it's like, why don't we just keep doing this? Unfortunately, from kind of a long-term perspective, this traditional PC thing is not necessarily the future of computing. And there are other people who kind of saw that, and they just weren't paying attention.
What's funny?
My head's so huge.
Why is your head?
It's so awful. I hate seeing it.
I need a wider shot. I don't think if you just listen to the audio version, I saw it on Twitter. There's a giant screen next to Paul. He's not just discussing his ego.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah, something worth pointing out too, because we just talked about Bill Gates. The person who brought Ray Ozzie in and thought he was maybe even the next CEO was Bill Gates.
Yeah.
And so that was a case of good judgment. If you liked what Ray Ozzie was trying to do. There was a lot of scuttlebutt.
Yes, but
right.
Once he was there, this is a place where Gates could have said, he could have taken that and forwarded it to the company and said, this is what we're doing, and guess what? That would have happened. But he did.
But guess who was CEO when Ray Ozzie was there? Steve Ballmer.
Steve Ballmer, yeah.
Right. So Steve Ballmer was backing the whole Windows, Steven Sinofsky play.
Right. So this is so we can get into it's impossible to know all of the details of what happened there. But I think it's fair to say that Steve Ballmer made bets on certain people,
right? And
they were either friends or just people he trusted for whatever reason. And he, I sort of alluded to this earlier. He put certain people in place. And so in the same way that in the mid-1990s, Brad Silverberg and Jim Alchin kind of squared off against each other, and Brad Silverberg lost and left. Steve Sinofsky and Ray Ozzie essentially squared off against each other. And Ballmer looked at Sinofsky as a guy who had done well with Office. He obviously did a great job with Windows 7, although I keep telling people, fixing Vista doesn't exactly take a rocket scientist. I mean, I think anyone could look at that and say, make it lighter, make it faster, that kind of thing. It's simple. Windows 8, less successful, I think it would be fair to say. We've lost a lot of time. We've had 3 versions of Windows since then, and you can kind of see how things are imploding a little bit on the Windows side.
Do we want to do any idle speculation on the next CEO? We've seen reports of Alan Mulally being bandied about, and then he's saying, I'm not leaving Ford just yet. He's ducking the question in a lot of interviews on USA Today. You talk about Ray Ozzie, as a person who had vision. Bill Gates himself, obviously a man who has vision when it comes to the early 2000s. He's like, tablet PCs are the future. And I was like, nah, that didn't work.
Well, okay, but you know what? The tablet PC that Bill Gates envisioned was not the future, right? I mean, I think that's the problem. I mean, everyone points to that, but the iPad that Apple came up with does not take a lot from that tablet PC vision, right? I mean, it dispensed with all of the technically excellent but rarely used technologies like handwriting as a primary data form without having to do handwriting recognition, although it also did, by the way, excellent handwriting recognition. The people that do use those things still really like that technology and talk about it a lot, but it's kind of a minority of people. But you can't go out in the world without seeing someone using an iPad. And so they're kind of, unfortunately, they're different things.
I don't know. I think they're getting vindication with the Samsung Styli, I guess, on their Note, their tablets. And obviously, Microsoft now with the Surface Pro does have that stylus. So maybe it took a long time to get there. But people were like, hey, I want to have more than one app up. The iPad's is kind of like this toy compared to...
Yeah, but it's a toy that sells hundreds of millions of units. I hear you, but... you can't argue with where the world has gone. And
it's funny. Microsoft gets beat up all the time for being a laggard, and people say they copy everyone else. If you really look at history, a lot of times Microsoft's actually too far ahead of the curve.
Wow.
They are. They are. I would argue. I'd argue they were too far ahead with tablet PCs. They were too far ahead with the smartwatch, right? And now everyone's doing smartwatches, and I think they're too far ahead on touch tablets too. But,
interesting. Okay.
Not tablets, but more touch.
So Microsoft should slow down?
Yeah, they just...
I don't think they should slow down, but I think sometimes they are a little...
That's interesting.
Ambitious about how they think uptake is going to be on certain things.
Yeah, they want the future now. That's the thing. Like that's the Spot Watch is one of the devices I hold near and dear to my heart as a concept. Never did get to buy one of those, but they closed down that service. I think it was only like a couple of years ago they closed down the actual service because I love how Microsoft keeps things going, even though they're far beyond the life of the product.
Well, you'll get another chance because there's another Microsoft Watch coming. Everybody believes probably summer 2014. So
nice.
You might have another chance to try.
Spot 2, the quickening.
Spot 2. Well, as long as they don't use it, the naming conventions will make me very interested in it. Hopefully, there's nothing with squirting or zunes or anything like that. Yeah. No UMPCs, none of that. Just call it wristwatch or something, please.
Xbox Watch.
And the question is, will I be able to run apps on it though? That's my real question. And where do I go for all the apps? Because there's supposed to be one store. You think the store is going to include the watch apps?
The one app store. So, this was interesting. Microsoft had their company meeting last week where they have tens of thousands of people come to Key Arena in Seattle. And they say to them when they go in there, nobody tweet, nobody blog about this, everybody keep this quiet. And so the very first thing they were talking about at that meeting was...
you skipped something. I was going to say, you skipped the vital part of that story, which is they told them not to do this.
Oh, yeah.
But
of course they do.
I mean, I've received complete rundowns from several people.
Exactly. So while the meeting was happening, Paul and I and others were getting tips from people about what was happening in the meeting. So so much for telling people not to talk about it.
Right.
But one of the things they talked about there, we've all heard, was the idea of the single Windows Store that would be for Windows Phone apps and also for Windows apps. And they've hinted they might do this before, but they actually came out and said it at the meeting, supposedly, that we are going to have a unified app store. It's going to come out when we have the next version of Windows.
Right.
Which we don't really know what that means. What is considered the next version of Windows? Is it Windows 9 or
is there going to be an 8.2 or
right. But they did say it's coming. We know that we should have done this, and we are going to do it, and we're further unifying the APIs, which is something they keep saying. We're going to make it so that it's easier for developers to reuse code, and that maybe there'll even be a case where you could have on your Windows machine a Windows Phone app running right alongside a Windows app on the same screen.
Yep.
So that would be cool, right?
Yeah.
That'd be a good idea.
Yeah, I think merging the Windows RT platform with Windows Phone down the line makes plenty of sense.
Yep. So. It definitely makes a lot of sense with the the Windows 8 interface. When you snap an app to the left, that could easily be a Windows Phone app. It would look just fine.
I've always said that. It would work like the sidebar, from Windows Vista.
Don't tell anybody that.
In a good way.
In a good way, yeah. I like I used to use the sidebar.
Yep. I used to download the free version of Sidebar. I forget which company made it back then. I don't know if it's StarDock.
Google made one, remember?
Oh, they did with their
Google
gadgets
desktop.
or something.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
Yep.
But we're gonna have a single app store. This is actually gonna work. Do you guys actually expect this to be ready by next year? I'm sure I've asked this before.
No,
okay.
But I expect them to make pushes in this direction. We've talked before about this kind of stuff. How easy it would be to make a core version of those WinRT APIs and base specific Windows versions off of those. Create supersets. So you could have one for desktop. You could have one for PCs and devices. You could have one for phone. You could have one for Xbox. However they want to do that, and then create versions of Visual Studio that work around that notion, where you could have a project that has core parts of code that would work across I guess those would be solutions that work across individual projects for the PC/device version of the app, the phone version of the app, and maybe a version that runs on the Xbox. I think that's where this is going to head. I don't think it's going to happen in April or something, but maybe some changes by next year.
Fall of next year. Yeah, because we talked about this on last week's show. There is a version of Windows supposedly coming next spring called Windows 8.1 Spring GDR, which is a minor update.
Such an awesome name.
Yeah, another awesome product name, but that's just a code name, but still.
Yeah, and by the way, that name is interesting because GDR is a name that they use for Windows Phone updates, right? And so you see that the guy who ran Windows Phone most recently is now running Microsoft's Core OS development. And so he certainly sees the need to bring these things together. Because when Steven Sinofsky and that group went off and did their version of the Metro environment, they obviously cribbed a lot from the Windows Phone guys, but they didn't really work together on anything. And I noticed this, you notice this right off the bat when you run these apps, so you look at this environment, and you can see how immature the Windows 8 version of it is compared to, say, Windows Phone. And then you move forward to Windows 8.1, and obviously it's a big improvement, but there are still things that are not in there that we're used to in Windows Phone. And you can see it across the board. You can see it in very broad ways, and you can see it in very specific kind of picayune ways. The types of accounts you can connect to it, and even the calendars types that you can see in the calendar app. It's so horribly immature compared to what happened on Windows Phone, and how much better things could have been if they had really just worked with Windows Phone. So now they're sort of working toward this future where they're going to connect these things. They should have done that from the get-go. It's too bad.
Yeah, I didn't hear them. I didn't hear anyone say that they also said that there would be the same store on the Xbox. Did you hear that? No. Because that's a possibility somewhere down the road, since Xbox is built on Windows 8 at the core. So you would think you could run some of those same apps, if not all, somehow on the Xbox. And I think that's probably a longer-term goal, to have that also have the same app store, but I don't think it's coming with the next version of Windows. I think that's too soon.
I just hope that all the apps kind of behave the same. Like if you want to, get rid of an app, you can swipe the same way from device to device to device.
No, that stuff drives me crazy.
Yeah.
And by the way, I talked about calendar because I'm writing a Windows 8.1 book and looking at Windows, used to Windows Phone, having written a Windows Phone 8 book. I'm looking at what's available in this app, and I'm thinking this doesn't make sense. And it's even little things, the language that they use to describe things, and this occurs throughout Windows, this calendar because it's in my head now. They have something called events in Windows 8, which are meetings and other things like that. Like a meeting is an event that where you invite other people. In Windows Phone, they call those things appointments. And it's like, guys, like you need to have a common language to describe things. I mean, and also common UIs and common user experiences. It needs to work the same way. It's bizarre to me. It's like two groups that are just kind of fighting each other instead of working together. It's crazy.
Sounds about the same. The infighting. Before we talk more about that company meeting, let's take a quick break and thank Squarespace, because this episode of Windows Weekly is brought to you by Squarespace.com, the all-in-one platform that makes it easy to create your own professional website or online portfolio. I know Tom Merritt's constantly talking about Squarespace. All his websites are built on it. Merritt Books, Sword and Laser. They look fantastic. But apparently, Tom doesn't really know how to code because Squarespace takes care of all of that. So they're constantly improving their platform, new features, new designs, lots of support there. Beautiful designs, like I mentioned, more than 20 new beautiful templates for you to start with, and all the style options you have to create a unique website for you or your business. So if you do know code, you can go in there and change things up, because if you want to be more than the template, you can do that. If you don't know anything about coding, you can just use their fantastically beautiful designs if you'd like. Squarespace has won numerous design awards, the FWA, awards from Forbes and the Webbies. It's easy to use. But if you don't know how to use it, you can always ask for help, because Squarespace has a support team that works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Their customer support team has won awards as well. Most recently, a Gold Stevie Award for outstanding service, and it's inexpensive. It just starts at $8 a month, and that includes a free domain name if you sign up for a year. And it's mobile ready. We keep talking about these lots of different devices, phones, desktops, laptops. These designs automatically include a unique mobile experience that matches the overall style of your website. So your content will look great on every device, every time. And their code is fantastic. It's not like the old Microsoft Publisher days where you'd look in the code and you start cringing. This is Squarespace code. It's clean. It's beautiful. The code is beautiful, too. Squarespace takes just as much pride on their back-end code as they do their front-end design. SEO, also a big deal. Search engine optimized. This ensures that your site's content can be crawled by Google, Yahoo, and maybe even that upstart Bing. They could also look through your website and find what your great content is. Hosting's included. Squarespace takes care of all the hosting, so you don't have to worry about that. Start a trial with no credit card required and start building your own website right now. When you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure to use the offer code Windows10 to get 10% off and to show your support for Windows Weekly. We thank Squarespace for the support of Windows Weekly. Squarespace, they're pretty much everything you need to create an exceptional website. We thank Squarespace for their sponsorship of Windows Weekly. So that Microsoft company meeting, There was a lot more information in there. The one that was told not to blog, but you guys have rundowns. Nobody should talk about it, so we're going to talk about it. What else came out of this company meeting?
Well, there was an app, another app that they demoed at the company meeting was codenamed Office Reader. And I don't know a whole lot about this app. I've read a couple reports, but supposedly it's going to be this app that lets you put everything that you would read, so textbooks, books from the Barnes & Noble store, documents, anything you would save for later reading together and be able to access it through a single app. And, you know, this is interesting because we've always been wondering, what did Microsoft ever invest in Barnes & Noble for back in the day? And this seems like this could be one of the new apps
app for Office.
that finally they actually are working with Barnes & Noble on, and they're getting some value back on that investment that they made. Did you know more about the Reader? Did you hear anything more on that?
No, not about the Reader.
No, and at first I thought that Reader app might be this thing that Microsoft's, we've gotten tips on in the past called Moria, which was supposed to be this app that built on top of OneNote and let people do assembling all kinds of documents, almost like if you remember the old Microsoft Courier design, let you kind of pull in things from different apps, have them available and accessible, and you could annotate them right inside your app. But after I kind of speculated that in a post I heard from someone who was at the company meeting who said, no, that was not Maria, and Maria is actually dead. That this Reader app is a brand new thing that the Office team is building. It's a Metro-style app, and it could be out this year even, this coming year, 2014.
Interesting.
Yeah. Did you hear other things from the meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I got some crazy detailed reports from people. I feel like I was there, throw it away. But they talked about a bunch of stuff. They talked about the post-PC world and how big the devices world is, kind of justifying their direction now with devices and services, and that the market for this thing is going to be 2.8 billion devices within just a couple of years. And when you compare that to the PC market, 350 million, I mean, it's just a completely different kind of world. And to give an example of how this has changed, even for Microsoft, the best-selling Windows device in the world this year, the best-selling single device, is a Windows Phone handset. It's the Lumia 520. It outsells every single other Windows device, including PCs and Surfaces and all that. Which is really interesting, right? It's $99. It's a cute little phone. No one thinks Windows Phone is doing very well, but there's this device that it has sold, just amazingly well. And it was probably, I don't have this in my notes, but it was probably part of the Terry Myerson part, part of the talk, where he also talked about the unifying development. They talked about Gemini, which is something I think Mary Jo was originated and talked about some of that stuff.
Yeah, so Gemini is the Metro-style versions of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and OneNote that Microsoft's building, and they're going to be out next year.
And I think this is the first time
they've talked about.
They've actually used that term.
Yeah, they've never used it publicly. Yeah. They've never said the word Gemini publicly, but they actually did a quick demo of Gemini at, I think it was at Build earlier this summer. They just showed, I think it was the PowerPoint app.
It was like a PowerPoint reader almost.
Yeah. So that's something else that we've known was coming, but Microsoft would never publicly admit they were even building.
Will Gemini kill off? Go ahead, Paul.
What'd you say?
I was going to say, will Gemini kill off the desktop on Surface RT? I'm not Surface RT, but Windows RT. Yeah. It seems to have a desktop specifically for, I guess, settings and Office.
I do think this is a key move toward that.
Same.
Yep.
Okay.
The other thing that they did, I believe this was a new number, they're always talking about XP and what percentage of XP user base is still out there in the world. And every time they do, the number goes down, but it's still a pretty big number. And the number they used at the event, which I think is new, was 27%, which if you, and I alluded to this yesterday, I got the number a little bit off, but if you believe, as Microsoft says, that there are 1.5 billion Windows PCs in the world, that means that there are like 400 and something million still running Windows XP. And here at the show, we had asked for a kind of a show of hands, how many people are still supporting XP in their environments. And I believe that the percentage of people that raised their hand was like 74%. I mean, it was a little scary. They reiterated that they were not going to continue supporting it. But they also said that contrary to kind of common knowledge, that Windows 7 would not become the next XP. The thought is that now they've got this last version that's desktop only, and people have these traditional PCs and they're not going to want to move forward to Windows 8. or 8.1, but Microsoft believes that Windows 8.1 has enough concessions in it to desktop users that they can actually get people to move forward to more modern versions of Windows.
And we were talking about the different naming conventions with appointments and events. Do we have a name yet for? Is it modern? Because I know we've been going back and forth on this. A lot of us still call it Metro. Has Microsoft, with Windows 8.1 coming up, and with this idea that they're going to unify APIs, have one store, do we have a name for this user interface?
It seems like they've unofficially centered on modern, right?
Modern?
I mean,
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes they use modern, sometimes they use Windows Store, like it's a Windows Store app. And I've even heard them use immersive too. They're immersive
also
apps.
Windows 8 apps.
Windows 8 app. So
Terrible
no,
name.
there's no one name.
I mean, they're reusing stuff. They're reusing Reader. I remember Reader used to be their ebook reader app, at least if I remember right. They're using the term Blades for the thing that goes with the Surface. Blades used to be a term for the Xbox UI.
Yep, that's
Don't they have anything sitting around that they could just reuse, just kind of rummage through like a bin and go, that's a good name. We could call it Notepad style. I don't care what they call it, but decide on something.
Yeah.
They do.
No,
I want to be able to say the right term. There's a massive company that could just tell me.
Surface is a reuse of a product name they had from that giant, the big ass table.
Exactly.
That we all seem to forget about. It's like it never happened.
Yep.
That's right. I forgot about that table. That's now what it's called, Pixel Sense. Even that worked okay.
Yep.
Okay, so hopefully, so speaking of the Surface and new, well, there's Surface 2 ads apparently, and according, I haven't seen them.
I guess I should have given you a link for that, but if you don't mind, go to YouTube and bring up, I think it's called Surface 2 Frames.
Well, I'm trying to use it on my Windows Phone YouTube app, but it keeps like getting destroyed.
Okay.
Sorry, I had to. But yeah, so you're claiming that they don't suck. These ads. How is that?
Yes. Okay, I thought you meant Windows Phone YouTube app.
Okay, here comes the ad.
Yeah, bring this. This is kind of a nice ad.
Just a laptop. They're not usually this thin, this light, with great battery life. They don't let you touch and draw. Not like this. This is not just a tablet. It has a clicking keyboard and Microsoft Office, so you can do real work. This lets you run your favorite apps next to your favorite apps. This is the new Surface, the one device for everything in your life.
I'm shocked. It actually shows what the product does.
Okay, but can you identify the central problem with this ad?
That it's saying that, they said Surface 2 at the end instead of Surface Pro 2.
Well, okay, so actually the ad commingled Surface 2 and Surface Pro 2.
Oh,
right?
That's
it showed capabilities of both. And so, for example, it mentioned that you could run the apps that you love to run, like Photoshop they showed, with the pen, which is a feature of Surface Pro.
That's the Pro.
But then they showed that they mentioned it comes with Office, and you can still be productive, and that's a feature of Surface 2, not Surface Pro. So it's a little, if you didn't know a lot about the product, which I think most people don't, you would see that ad, and the takeaway is, look at all this stuff this thing does. But this thing isn't a thing, it's two things, and they have kind of commingled the capabilities of the two, which I think is a little unfortunate.
Well, maybe the next Surface they'll just put both of them
Surface
together.
3, yeah.
Like Surface 3 will become in a 2-pack.
The thing is,
That way you'll get
to be
both.
fair, I do think these products are a lot better, or better enough, if that makes sense. Surface 2 in particular, I'm very curious to see just from a performance perspective. I do think they have something that some people are going to want. I mean, I think it's a nice product and so forth, but I don't know. The more you know, the more alarming the way they're advertising it is. At least they don't have the dancing guy.
I know. No dancing schoolgirls.
Although if you're paying attention to the music, that's the same music.
It was the same music, right?
It's the same music from the original ads.
Yeah.
They had the dancing schoolgirls from Surface RT and then the dancing guy on the table from Surface Pro. But that music is kind of a remixed version of the theme, the Surface theme music.
Yeah, but the
Which should
original
be like startup sound,
Yeah.
The original Surface ads were about branding. You had to know the Surface name, and you had all this dancing, and all you knew is that this device can come apart and be put together with a click. which didn't tell you what it did. So at least
the click.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. And you still had the little click clacky noises of the Surface 2 and the Surface Pro 2, but at least, like, I guess I'm a bit surprised that Microsoft decided to show what a computer can do. A lot of ads just don't do that, which I think is silly.
Positioning it, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so here they are. Here's the original Surface ads.
No, don't make me do this.
It's not our. This is what they chose to do.
Someone at Microsoft clearly heard this click, and I have to think it was actually not something they planned, but rather something that happened. They thought, "Oh my God, we've got to highlight this. It's so awesome."
It's
like
one
saying
Microsoft.
That the best thing about buying a new car is the sound the door makes when you close it. You know, like it has nothing to do with the actual use.
Remember, they were super proud about the click.
Super proud. They still are.
It was like something big at the launch.
They
talked about it a lot.
They love that.
Well,
because it has that satisfying ka-chunk sound. You know,
clearly, somebody had seen Stomp right before. They're like, I got this idea with my tablet. Oh yeah,
I want to be hip so bad. Look at this. You know,
this makes me cringe. But the other ad was much better. At least this. Hopefully they'll deprecate
Although
this.
It looked like that astronomer had found God somehow, which I thought was kind of a conflicting message.
That's a different. Did that app run on Surface? I'm not sure.
I have wasted my life.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got that. We've got So there was some news that Microsoft's going to try out a bunch of the different form factors, different aspect ratios for the Surface.
But how did this come out?
So this came. Panos Panay, who's the head of Surface, who was the guy who kidded around with me and Paul at the launch. He is now on tour, right? He's going to all these Microsoft stores.
The North American tour, 2013.
On tour, and he was at the Seattle Microsoft store, and he actually said a few different things at that event. I don't think it was supposed to be a news event, but it ended up becoming one.
Yeah, that's what Todd Bishop was. Yeah.
Todd Bishop was there from GeekWire and kind of, I think, grilled him a little bit. And he said, Panos Panay said that there are going to be different aspect ratio surfaces coming at some point. Which is good. Maybe we'll have a portrait mode. Yeah. And then he also said the LTE model of the Surface, which we know is coming early next year, like springtime, is first going to debut on AT&T and Vodafone. So they hadn't said which carriers were going to get that.
So by the way, I had something about that a week. Oh, no, I didn't. That was about the Nokia one.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, so too bad for us on Verizon yet again.
Well, Vodafone is sort of Verizon.
I think Vodafone divested themselves of all that interest. I think Verizon bought itself for something strange in that situation. So, if we're going to have LTE versions, we're going to have a different mode. So instead of holding that 16:9 Surface, which looks a little ridiculous, looks like a biblical tablet. You know,
it's one of those optical effects, because when you're looking at it like this, it looks completely normal, and then you turn it this way and it goes like somehow it turns into this giant.
I know.
I don't know why. It's a weird thing.
It's just very long.
The other thing that came out this past week was the notion that the mini version of the Surface is going to be, delayed until next year. And the timing of that is, I'm not really sure we have an exact handle on that anymore. But one of my better sources suggested to me that it could be any time next year. He used the phrase, I think it was, fiscal year, I guess.
Yeah, fiscal 2014.
I guess
so
that would be through
by
the middle
June,
of the year.
right?
By the,
I heard spring. So maybe a spring launch and ship in May, June or something. So that's the mini Surface is a 7 to 8 inch size Qualcomm ARM-based tablet that Microsoft's building. And
meaning Windows RT.
Right, Windows RT.
Yep.
We don't know what they're going to call it. Like, is it going to be Xbox Surface, Surface Mini? We don't know how they're going to refer to that. Surface 3, who knows?
Oh, God.
Surface 4, 5.
Well, clearly Microsoft needs to invest in flexible displays or something that you can scroll or something, because you're right, Paul. The form factor is bizarre when you switch it to portrait.
It's
and
strange.
Then the mini, weird. Though, I'm still a little confounded by the idea that it'll run RT as opposed to running full-on Windows 8.1 at that point, considering how efficient the Intel processors have gotten in that space, and the fact that Microsoft, they basically have no partners when it comes to Windows RT at this point because everyone left them.
Yep.
So I think part of that has to do around the goal for that device, where it's a pure consumption device, and they just don't want people using desktop applications on that, and this would be one way to make sure that happens, I guess.
Excel on a 7-inch tablet is kind of ugly.
Yeah, not great. Well, in iTunes, which is basically Excel, or whatever other types of desktop apps you might want to run. They just don't make sense in that kind of device. And I think by delaying it to next year, a couple of things that happen are, the ecosystem matures, and maybe we'll see more of the consumption kind of entertainment apps that that platform needs. But I also wonder about the form factor thing. I wonder if that's not tied because that device could make sense as a reader, and maybe if it was a slightly squarer screen, that it would make more sense in portrait mode and so forth. I don't have any hard facts on that or whatever, but it seems to make sense.
Yeah, the 7-inch form factor makes it's you're starting getting closer to that phablet line, or like a 6-inch one would be a phablet. 7-inch is still a tablet at that point, and that's probably when you want to be able to use those Windows Phone apps on a device like that, assuming that actually comes to fruition, that the one store has everything. That 7-inch tablet will become a lot more interesting because you'll have all of these Windows Phone apps, theoretically, maybe by that point.
Well, so a Windows Phone, the highest resolution Windows Phone today, although this is about to change, is 1280 by 768, right? And that's not, what aspect ratio is that? I'm not even sure. Is that 16 by 10? Does anybody know? It seems like you'd want to keep it to an aspect ratio that would be supported by Windows Phone as well.
Like it just bump Windows Phone can handle.
Yeah, 1080p
is coming,
is,
1080p is on the way.
That's GDR3 for Windows Phone, which is this fall.
Yeah. So maybe it'll be a 1080p device.
That's when you're blurring those lines a lot when it comes to what can. And when you talk about 1080p display, that works on a 5-inch device. It'll work on a 4-inch device. It'll work on a 10-inch device. So
a Windows Phone Xbox Live game like Asphalt 7 or whatever, or the new Halo game running on an 8-inch screen would be fantastic. Yeah.
So Windows Phone might not be a monstrous hit in the U.S., but I'm reading here that now in Europe, it's actually quite the success. It's like a big player.
This worked out great for the Amiga, so I know this is going to be a major a major thing for Windows Phone as well. But.
So it's
so what are the new numbers?
Well, it varies from country to country, but I think the figure for the 5 biggest economies in Europe, it's north of 9% now. In some places, it's over 10%. In Germany, is it beating iPhone or it's catching just has almost surpassed iPhone?
That's crazy.
Now, obviously, with Apple releasing a new version of the iPhone or 2 new versions of the iPhone this quarter, they're going to get that annual bump that they do. And so these figures could kind of reverse themselves temporarily. But, you know, this is not something that's happening in isolation. We've gotten lots of reports about this kind of stuff. The Europe stuff has happened in previous quarters. We've seen it in countries in South America, in Mexico, in different markets around the world. And I've always said that for Windows Phone to be kind of a viable platform, a viable business for Microsoft, it needs to hit double digits, and meaning 10%. And I think it's kind of getting there. Yeah. And the bigger that this mobile device market gets, remember I think the figure was 2.8 billion devices that Microsoft had. 10% of that is 280 million, and that's the PC market. I mean, if they could have 10% of the phone market, whatever that works out to be, I think that's a significant step forward for the future.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that success is going to, I guess, transfer to any other markets? If it's a hit in Europe, that's great. I mean, David Hasselhoff was huge in Germany, but that doesn't mean that he was a viable U.S.
So
star.
you're not the first person that brought up David Hasselhoff, but I will say this.
Sorry, I'm a Knight Rider
David Hasselhoff made a lot of money in Europe, so I mean that's okay for him. The problem for Windows Phone is that it is not popular in the 2 biggest markets in the world, and those are the United States and China, and maybe not in that order. And that's something that Microsoft needs to address, that Windows Phone needs, I don't think they can succeed and not be popular in at least one of those 2. And so they've had a lot of issues there. Apple dominates in the United States in ways that they do not in other parts of the world. Apple also has problems in China, which is why everyone thought that the iPhone 5S, 5C, whatever, would be lower cost devices that they, at least in China, and they didn't go in that route. And so there's sort of an opening there for Windows Phone, because obviously we have a lot of low-end devices now. We have the Lumia 520, which is the best-selling Windows device in the world. And so there's a chance. But, for all of the good news, I think we got to remind ourselves, the United States and China are kind of black marks on Windows Phone for now. So hopefully that's something that gets reversed.
Now, apparently there's like some kind of cut and paste mistake that keeps happening on this OneNote rundown, because it says here again there's another Microsoft trade-in promotion. This has been every week I've been on this show. There's been a trade-in promotion. I'm just assuming this is a mistake, Mary Jo.
Nope, not a mistake. So there's a new, as of last week, a new trade-in promotion on Microsoft's website. If you bring in your iPhone, I think it's 4S or 5, gently used iPhone 4S or 5.
Is there any other way to use an iPhone?
No, there's no other way to use it. You can get up to $200 gift card that you can use towards a purchase of anything in the Microsoft Store. So this is obviously meant to get people to buy Windows phones and Surfaces. But you could use it for other things, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah, it's like every week. Yeah, there's a new trade-in promotion. The week before it was iPads, like if people wanted to trade in your iPad, right?
Yep.
So yeah, they're trying. I don't know how many people would actually do this, but why not? Why not try?
I just imagine this kind of Indiana Jones style warehouse full of old iDevices that Microsoft is stockpiling.
Right.
And, maybe they'll bury it in the desert next to those Atari cards.
Yeah, I think they're actually, at least some of these, they're refurbishing with a third-party partner, and they're reselling them overseas. The partner is reselling them, not Microsoft, or sometimes donating them too to charity, which is interesting.
Selling them in China, because I guess the iPhone's not doing so good.
Right. Yeah.
This is the low-cost iPhone for China, right here from Microsoft.
Exactly.
Yeah, it says the trade-in thing is a minimum $200 gift card, so that's the minimum you're going to get. That's quite impressive.
Yep.
Actually not bad, yeah.
This actually does have a chance of arbitrage if you want to try that. If you want to make some money, if you can get an iPhone for under $200, you'll make some money for Microsoft in an unconventional way.
There's still no RT trade-in program, which people are asking a lot. How about them doing this for Surface RT?
Yeah, I think they've lost enough on RT.
Yeah, I'm like, probably not happening. But
yeah, there's a lot of call for that, but
I know.
I don't see them doing that.
No.
All right, so we've got Windows phones doing quite well. We've got trade-ins happening all the time. We've got Visual Studio 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
What's going on with this?
I'll do a quick take for the developers in the house. Microsoft announced pricing this week for Visual Studio 2013, which is the latest version, follow-up to last year's Visual Studio 2012. There's going to be basically comparable pricing. So if you're a new user, you'll be able to buy the professional version for $499, the version with MSDN $799, Visual Studio Premium with MSDN for $25.69, Visual Studio Ultimate with MSDN for $42.49. And the availability dates also were new this week that they shared. So Microsoft's already RTM'd Visual Studio 2013. They're going to make it generally available starting October 18th. November 1st is when people with MSDN subscriptions will be able to get their hands on the phone bits, and retail resellers will have it soon thereafter. And interestingly, Microsoft's launch of Visual Studio 2013 is not till November 13th. So that you're actually going to get the product before they launch the product, which is...
that's going to be tied to an event.
It's going to be tied to an event. Well, they're doing a launch in New York, I think, but it's a virtual launch too, so anybody can sign up through their website if you want to watch the launch event on the 13th. So there you have it, Visual Studio 2013.
And I see we have a special guest coming up.
I've got a person growing out of my shoulder.
Oh, there he goes. Did he enter through the door? I could have had a big entrance. No?
Well, I was thinking about that. Thought about trying to find some velvet to drape over myself because it is Vegas, but I couldn't.
I wanted him to do like a Chuck Norris thing where he comes up out of the floor.
Well, you could probably cheat that with the shot, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got it's Rod Trent.
Rod, explain yourself.
Yes, who are you? What do you do? And
I think my mom's probably asked me that more times than you have. Please explain yourself. I'm Rod Trent. I'm with Windows IT Pro. I work with Paul and
I'm so sorry.
Well, yeah, you do have to kind of manage that situation quite a bit. I'm just kidding. But no, Windows IT Pro, myitforum.com. I've been a community guy most of my life and enjoy that stuff. But I deal with Microsoft. I deal with Microsoft products quite a bit. So.
Speaking of managing things.
Oh, my.
Yeah, so the reason Rod's here is there's been an ongoing discussion lately that he's been at the center of, which is this kind of perception that Microsoft is abandoning the core enterprise market and pushing customers to the cloud and kind of pushing IT out of the picture, if you will. And, I've written some articles just recently, Rod has as well, and here we are, with an IT audience, and it is obviously a major concern. And so Mary Jo and I did a panel yesterday, and we had Rod up to talk about that a little bit, but maybe if you don't mind,
yeah, I don't mind.
Let's speak to that a little bit here.
Yeah, well, I do have an update. Apparently, Mark Russinovich is in a different room, and he just said that IT is not going away, so it's all moot.
All right, thanks for coming, Ron.
Okay, thanks a lot. No, what he actually said today was that IT is not going away, that it is changing. However, with consumerization and everything going on and given the end user the experience they need to do their own stuff with IT, then how many IT will actually be needed? So is it 1, 2?
Yeah.
So the whole thing is, and it goes back to conversation. A good friend of mine works for Microsoft around 2002. Microsoft's intent, even at that point, before the technology was even available, was they viewed IT, they wanted to turn IT into a service. They wanted to turn it much like a utility, and I've used the term sewage quite a bit.
I prefer the term electricity, but
electricity is good too.
Yep.
But they would like to be able to turn IT into a utility. At that time, the cloud was not prominent. There were certain, Hotmail is a cloud thing, but nobody had actually coined it at the point. But now we're today where the cloud is available and the technology is there, and Microsoft is pushing heavily to push on-premise technologies to the cloud, and with the ultimate goal of Microsoft being your IT, whether it's through a service or maybe there's a Microsoft person somewhere monitoring and managing your information and storing your data for you. But that would be the ultimate goal. And when I think about it realistically, that from them trying to push everything to a subscription model, that's really truly the only way they can make money. So, and just add to that, Microsoft's intent is to be able, their success in their mind is to be able to compete with Google and Apple.
Yep.
Now, Google and Apple do not care about the enterprise. They're all cloud, they're all devices.
Right.
And for Microsoft to be able to get to that point, it just seems like IT is that barrier. And if they can get rid of IT, or whether the intent is there or not,
Nirvana.
they can actually compete with those companies that they want to compete with.
Getting
Yeah,
rid
I
of
mean,
IT sounds like a way to make sure nothing works.
Right. I don't think IT actually goes away. And I think the consensus really is that IT is changing and evolving, and I think a lot of the kind of on-prem IT gets de-emphasized, but we're always going to need people to manage these systems. I mean, especially in the larger organizations. Google is going to take a certain percentage of the really small businesses. Apple's obviously huge with individuals and consumers, but Microsoft does have a strength moving forward here that they can transition companies to the cloud, but the question is, how much of a role that traditional IT plays during that transition, and then after that transition.
Well, whether the intent is there or not, they are creating a gulf between IT professionals and Microsoft at this point.
Yep.
Because IT pros don't feel the love right now. TechNet subscriptions, they canceled those, which they relied on. Some major certifications are gone. Some of the really popular conferences, Microsoft Management Summit was just announced that it's being absorbed into
such a good word.
Yeah, so Microsoft's been trying to make this decision for years, whether to merge MMS with TechEd, and it would ultimately happen. We knew that, but Microsoft took a couple months to try to come up with the best communication that people would accept when they merged it. So they came up with the word absorbed. To me, that just sounds evil. I don't think it was the right communication, but Microsoft's not really ever been good at marketing, so.
Or communication.
Or communication, correct.
Which is why we all thrive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Do you think Microsoft will do like a Mayday-like service like Amazon has? They say, forget it. Your IT guy's in a box, in a window.
Right.
You can just tile him to the left.
The Mayday button in Windows, that will be IT.
It's not clippy, I promise.
Be some guy in Pakistan or something.
Okay.
So, yeah, sorry about that. That is kind of a downer for IT folks. And I promised myself yesterday, and I didn't follow my own idea that I would just smile talking, that just
And be
smile
positive.
real big.
Yeah.
So either people thought that I either wasn't serious, I was making a joke, or it was so positive.
Or that you hate IT pros so much that you made up this lie.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. But
it's so dry
I guess
that
what I'm
people
trying to
can't
say
tell.
is that it's him, it's not me.
I'm the heavy. I'm like Paulie Walnuts. I come in and take up people's kneecaps.
Nice.
Yeah.
We need a fixer, Rod.
We're going to need different lower thirds, too. A lower third that is Paulie Walnuts, Rod, Paulie Walnuts, Trent. And So anything else, Rod, before we move on to the listener Q&A? Because I know there are people waiting, just clamoring to start talking to you two guys. Three, I guess.
Oh, my goodness. No.
Actually, most of the people have already left the room, so we're going to be a little light on questions. You
Oh,
guys are gonna
fantastic. I'm really glad we can really hold the audience, the live audience. We should have given...
I think
There's some sessions competing with
first
us,
we were
right?
competing with Mark Razinovich, but I think now we're competing with lunch.
I told you guys to bring sandwiches. I mean, really. We've been through this so many times.
Yeah.
Oh, so I guess you're going to have people come up to a microphone, or are you passing around? What's the situation?
We could just repeat the question.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to
Do you guys want to
repeat
play moderator while I just sit here looking stupid?
Well, okay.
There's some on Twitter too.
Yeah, I think you should. We should monitor Twitter as well.
Yeah.
But
Okay, I've got a couple on Twitter. Let's see.
I need you people to show up. The last 7 or 8 of you that are left. So
Anybody have questions out there on anything, any Microsoft thing?
A question from Twitter here says, why did Microsoft not include a Wacom digitizer in the Surface 2? It's the thing I love most about my Surface Pro.
So we can't answer why questions. Is there a technical reason that Windows RT cannot support an actual, like an active digitizer and the handwriting? No, it could work.
There's drivers though too, right?
Yeah, but I mean, that's something Microsoft could obviously do for its own product. I think that the reason is they need to differentiate the products, and they want you to move up to the Pro product for that. And, and speaking of this kind of removal of the desktop future thing, I think they see Windows RT as more of the consumption product. They're selling it now with Office because they kind of have to, because that's what people think of when they think of Windows, and no one would buy it if it didn't have Office. But I think the future that's going to be moving toward more, and again, it's just like the cloud thing. It's not 100% one direction or the other, but more consumption, less productivity. If you want the productivity stuff, you go traditional Windows.
Do you have any more questions from your Las Vegas audience? Anyone dare attempt to grab the microphone?
People disappoint me. Yes. Right. Yes, we do.
We're going to have to ask one of you to repeat the question because we can't hear it at all.
Yeah, so the question was about coming Surface accessories. There's a lot going on there. One of the specific things was about the dock. So we've got a new Surface dock coming. It's going to work for Surface Pro and Surface Pro 2. And the reason for that is it actually connects to the Surface on the sides. And of course, the Surface Pro and Pro 2 have the identical port structure, whereas the Surface RT and Surface 2 do not. It supports mini display port 1.2, which means you can chain. So there's only one, but you can chain the displays. And so you can actually have, I think, 3 total. Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
More than two. I don't know if it's the actual dongle that you do it off of, or I'm not actually sure how that works, but it supports it. I don't know. I've never done it, so I'm not really sure how that works. I'm sorry, and he asked how you would. So in other words, maybe you go mini display port to a screen, and then you go mini display port off of that to the next screen, or maybe there's a mini display port dongle that has 2 connectors. I'm not actually sure how that works. The one thing, I was talking to somebody yesterday about this, if you have a Surface Pro, the original, which a lot of guys at a show like this would, you're actually pretty well set up for the future, because not only do all of the accessories work with that device, but some of them actually improve the experience pretty dramatically, right? So one of the problems with the original Surface Pro is battery life, but you can add a power cover starting early next year and get, we don't know the exact figure, but let's say 2 to 3 hours maybe of extra battery life, which I think significantly enhances that experience and maybe removes the one big problem with that device. It works with the new docking station, and so you get that kind of workstation type thing where you can drop it in, use it on the big screen, keyboard, whatever, and then bring it with you, and you've got your tablet travel device. And so I think that's kind of interesting. Whereas on the Surface RT side, fewer of the new accessories work, and you're a little more high and dry going forward, because the performance isn't going to improve enough, I don't think, to make a big difference.
Yeah. The one question I've gotten a lot is about the power covers. And people are asking, why aren't the keys backlit on the power cover?
Yeah, that's a great question.
It's like Microsoft introduced all these new keyboards, right? And the new ones, the click-in, flat type and touch covers, they have backlit keys. The power cover, the one that you would think would have backlit keys, does not have a backlit.
And those new ones that do are thinner than the keyboards they
Right.
replace, so it's not like it's taking up some kind of space. I don't know.
Yeah, that was an odd one.
I don't know.
There's a new car charger too. There's a new Surface Touch mouse, right? It's one of the new accessories.
Yep.
And a lot of these accessories aren't going to ship this year. So the docking station's next year. I think power covers
And
next year, right?
Yep.
And we're going to see more colors. There's going to be more colors for touch and type. And I think as they introduce more new form factors and all, we don't know yet what the accessories are going to be for the Mini when that comes, and what the keyboard or cover situation on that'll be, how that'll look.
Yep.
A question from the chat room. If Microsoft unifies the App Store for various versions of Windows, do you guys think there'll be bundled deals for software that'll run on all three platforms, or do you think you got to buy them individually?
Oh, boy.
That would actually be cool, right?
Yeah, I think
if you buy
that would be great.
Facebook app, you could run it on Xbox and also on your Windows 8, Windows
So we
7.
don't know anything about that, but that's obviously a great idea. And if someone's thinking along those lines, I'm sure Microsoft is as well. So I would hope so.
Yeah.
Certainly that's, I talked earlier about the ability to run a game like Asphalt 7 or whatever it is on a Windows tablet would be kind of cool if you already owned it on Windows Phone. I mean, even better would be the native version of that, and plus getting it on the Xbox as well. So that would be great, but I don't know anything about that.
So do you think they would do it? That's the real question. Not would it be great, but
yes,
will
I do.
Microsoft, does that seem like
they
in line
should.
with their, well,
I think they will.
Yeah.
I do, yeah.
And because they want to sell more, they want to sell more devices and more apps, right? And they want to help developers.
Well, and by the way,
encourage them.
they've been very squishy on the licensing rules lately, and they're improving things. They're improving the number of devices you can run a Windows Store app on. I mean, pretty dramatically, from 5 to 81, which is kind of a crazy change.
Yep.
On Windows Phone, I don't actually know off the top of my head or remember off the top of my head if there is a limit on those devices. There must be.
Yeah. I don't remember.
But I would assume we're going to see a similar easing of the rules there, and of course that would fall very nicely into this kind of thing. So.
Well, the one place though there isn't is Xbox Music, though, right? Or
Well,
the Music Pass.
So yeah, that's really complicated.
I know. Sorry, I brought that
Yeah.
up.
So the way that Xbox Music works, if you just exclude the 360 for a second, is you can stream on as many devices as you want. There's no actual limit. But once you download a song from your collection or from the store to that device, that goes into a bucket, and you do have a limit of 4 devices. And you can swap out 2 every month. It's not, the apps you can swap out at any time, which is kind of a nice capability. I run into this limit a lot because I actually use Xbox Music a lot. And of course, I test a lot of different devices, and I've had problems along the lines where I couldn't remove a device and I couldn't add a device, and you run into that kind of thing. But I think for most people, it's probably not an issue. But streaming, you can stream for free on the web, and they're very liberal there. You can stream for free on Windows Phone and on Windows devices, Windows 8 and RT. And you can stream on the Xbox too, just to add that in. But on the Xbox, you need 2 things for that to work. You need an Xbox Live Gold subscription, which is, I think, $60 a year. And you need a Xbox Music Pass, which is $99 a year. So it's kind of surprisingly restrictive in that one device. And so I think they're going to get there.
I think they have to, yeah.
Well, before we get to all our picks of the week, we should take a quick break and thank Audible, because this episode of Windows Weekly is also brought to you by Audible.com. Audible.com, you guys already know them. There's no way you don't know who they are. They're a leading provider of audiobooks with more than 150,000 downloadable titles across all kinds of literature. So if you want to listen to a fiction book, a nonfiction book, even periodicals, well, Audible's got it. And for Windows Weekly listeners, Audible's offering a free audiobook to give you a chance to try out their service. And Paul, you've got an Audible pick of the week. What are you listening to these days?
So, I mean, if you've been paying attention to my past several picks, I've been listening to Stephen King a lot this year. And part of the reason is that the way I listen to Audible is I walk and listen to Audible. I noticed on the way out here, I'm on the plane and trying to listen to an audiobook. And it was kind of hard because I'm not really doing anything. And I feel like I should be doing something when I'm just sitting there. And it's weird to do that for me. But Stephen King has a lot of short stories, not full-length books, and also novellas, which are easier to digest in 45 to 60-minute increments. But his latest book just came out this past week, I think about a week ago, and it's a sequel to The Shining, and it's called Dr. Sleep. And I've been listening to that ever since, and so I'm kind of just about 50% of the way through it, and it is surprisingly good. I reading the description of it before it came out, it didn't seem like something that I was a little nervous it wasn't going to be that great, because, of course, The Shining came out probably about 30 years ago now. And it picks up the story of the kid from the book, and from the original book, I should say. And he's an adult, and he had his own alcohol problems like his father, and kind of just takes the story. It literally picks up when The Shining leaves off, and it jumps forward in time until he becomes an adult. But it's a surprisingly good story, and it's a long one. It's like 18 and 18 and a half hours or something. So I'm about 9 hours into it, but really good. It's really good.
Paul always listens to the most chipper audiobooks.
I'll try to. I'm gonna try to move past Stephen King.
We're gonna have to get you onto like some Tim Ferriss books or something like that.
I'm almost ready for another World War II book, so maybe I'll get there next.
Wow, you're just so into happiness. But yeah, if your tastes vary from Paul's, or you really like what Paul's picking, you can get any of those audiobooks for free with this promotion here. To download that book Paul's mentioned, what was the name of that again?
Dr. Sleep.
Dr. Sleep. You can get that audiobook for free if you go to audible.com/windows. That's audible.com/windows, and you can download yourself a free audiobook. Again, if you want something chipper, I would avoid what Paul's picking. But,
by the way, okay, it's a picture of Leo. That's why I was looking that list of books. If you bring that picture up, I have read almost every single one of those. It was like a picture of my collection. I was like, what are you looking at? It's like The Moat in God's Eye by Jerry Pournelle. That's bizarre. It's bizarre because but it's a Leo thing. That makes sense.
So
Leo and I have surprisingly similar. Well, I think he found out about Solaris from me, but that's interesting that those books are there.
So have you listened to Inside Apple?
Yep.
You have.
We did. It's just a collection of the New York Times stories. It actually wasn't. Oh no, that's not the right one. Is that the right one? I think that's the New York Times one. Yeah, I have listened to it.
That's always great. If you just want to like walk around like Paul's doing, you can listen to all these
I don't
books.
get enough of Apple,
Not on this show, anyway. Let's move on to picks of the week. Other than the Audible pick of the week, we've got a tip from Paul. It looks a little bit what's the word? Chilly.
Chilly? Mm-hmm. It is chilly. Screw it. This is my podcast. I can be chilly.
Be a shill.
So I've been writing books for the past year. That I self-publish, and the first two were free, and the next one will be paid, but it's going to be super cheap. But the reason I'm mentioning this as a tip is it's funny. I spent almost a year writing a book about Windows Phone 8, and I kind of created it. It's a huge book. It's 650 pages long, and I kind of just put it out there as a gift for Windows Phone users. For the Windows 8 book, which I'm working on with Raphael now, we want to figure out a way to get paid for this, and we're working on that, and we'll have something on the web soon. But in preparation for that, we were looking at some of the other ways to publish books electronically, and of course there are kind of ebook publishing formats, which I had never done for Windows Phone Book before. And so I looked into EPUB and Mobi, and of course eventually we want to get them into the Kindle store and the Nook store and all that kind of stuff. But it's really strange, like. After spending a year writing these things, I took the Windows Phone book and I published it to Mobi format, and I put it on my Kindle, and now it's like suddenly it became real to me. Like this is like this, now it's like a book. Because before I had made it as just a PDF. And it's really funny seeing it in the Kindle, like it suddenly made it real to me. And so I made versions of the Windows Phone 8 book and also the Xbox Music book available in both EPUB and Mobi, and so you can put them on Kindles and Nooks or whatever you have. And as I update those books going forward, they'll always be free, and I'll now publish them in those formats as well. And so it may seem chilly, but these are free books.
So your tip of the week is if you're writing a book, make sure you put it in the Mobi format, put it on your Kindle, then it'll feel real?
No.
Is that the tip?
No, that's not my tip. My tip
I
is,
missed it.
I think most people have a Kindle or a Nook or some kind of ebook reader or ebook software, whatever. And the advantages of getting one of these books in those formats is that a PDF on a Kindle is it's like looking at a bitmap of a page. And so if you have a small screen device, it's kind of hard to read the text, and it doesn't auto flow and all that kind of stuff. But when you publish it into Mobi or EPUB, it becomes more like an actual document. And so you can change the font size, you can flow the text in more intelligent ways, and it's better suited for those devices. And so the tip, I guess, so to speak, is just to get those books. And then we'll be publishing some more information about the next book soon as well.
And what is our software pick of the week?
Well, in keeping with the move to cloud services, Microsoft has released a new version of the Hover game, right, which was included on the Windows 95 CD-ROM almost 20 years ago. It's kind of like a bumper car capture the flag kind of thing, and they've made a new version of it for the web. And so if you go to hover.ie with a modern web browser, I've only actually tested it with Internet Explorer. See, it actually says you need Internet Explorer. Oh, it's because you're using an older version of IE. It's a surprisingly nice presentation. It's got nice music. It's got great graphics. You can play multiplayer against other people in these kind of virtual levels. And so they've updated the game and made it available for free. And this is the third release I can think of recently that's something like this. They did a version of Contre-Jure, which is an awesome mobile game also for the web, which is, I think, at contrajure.ie. And then they also did an amazing Mount Everest experience, which is also available. Actually, it's not the URL for that one off the top of my head. I apologize. But this is kind of the third in a series of these kind of releases where they're basically showing that you can do HTML5 style applications and games on the web that are just as nice as kind of a native app. And obviously you have to be online to play it, but he'll bring it up here maybe in a second. So it works with a keyboard if you don't have a touch screen, but it's optimized for multi-touch. And so if you do have a multi-touch screen, you can't see that at all, can you? Well, we can't see it here in the studio, or in the room.
I got it playing over here. I got to mess with the brightness to see it, but
it's got all the physics.
This is on the web. This looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
I can't do anything with this game because I don't know what I'm doing.
There you go. It's great. So that's my pick.
The pick is to go do it with an actual Internet Explorer 11. Don't do it with old versions or try with anything else. And also change your brightness if you're going to show it on the air.
It also works on the Mac.
What?
When it doesn't, I come this thing to the floor. No, it really redraws slow.
So it's not working so well over there?
No, it says you need a browser that supports WebGL to play Hover. Not this piece of crap on the Mac.
Gaming on the Mac is not a thing.
It actually says that.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the enterprise pick of the week, which is not Hover for the web, from what I hear.
No. It's, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce the enterprise pick of the week. I think the way I would pronounce it is Ryujit, Ryujit. And what this is a, is that how you would pronounce it?
That's right.
It's a new 64-bit compiler, .NET compiler that Microsoft put a preview out for this week. So they already had a 64-bit compiler, but they've redone it. They've used some of the code base from the C++ team for this, which is interesting. And they're promising that it's going to speed everything up. All the apps that you compile using this will be much, much faster than the current .NET compiler. But to me, the most interesting piece of this was, while it's only for x64 right now, this is a, quote, modern compiler. And it will be the basis for all our JIT compilers in the future, they're saying, including for x86, for ARM, and for the Microsoft Intermediate Design Language, too. So this is kind of indicating there have been tips that Microsoft wanted to create one compiler that would work for C# and C++. This is not that, but it feels like this is maybe a stepping stone on the way to that goal. So the preview's out, available for anyone to download as of this week, of Ryujit.
Sorry, I got lost in my gaming here on trying this out.
Nice.
Got
I
it.
finally got it to work. Although that name, Ryujit, just makes me think of Street Fighter, makes me think of gaming, which I think brings us to our codename pick of the week, which is not Ryujit for some reason.
It should be.
Right. Our codename pick of the week is Rio. And this is another thing that leaked from Microsoft's company meeting last week. At the company meeting, a bunch of us heard that they actually showed off Halo 4 streaming down from the cloud to a Windows Phone and a Windows PC, I believe. So this is what they're building. They're building a cloud gaming service at Microsoft. And, you know, before you say, wow, how could that really work? What would the performance be? Yeah. Supposedly, they've figured out how to do this. And people who saw this demo said it was actually very decent performance. I even heard one of the goals is ultimately to enable cloud gaming on non-Windows devices as well, like maybe streaming down to an iPhone or to an Android tablet, right? Yep. So we don't know how close this is, I don't think, unless you have any extra info on that, Paul. But yeah, they're showing this off. I think they tried to build this before. There was something codenamed Ridgeway before that was a cloud gaming service based on Xbox 360 that never came to market. But this seems to be an Xbox One-centric thing, possibly.
Well, that makes a lot of sense since Xbox.
No, add, please.
Two things. I mean, this is maybe speculation. One is the notion that this could be the solution to backwards compatibility in the Xbox One because it doesn't run Xbox 360 games. they could stream games to the console, which
That'd be cool.
I want to say Sony already does or will do for PlayStation 4. The other one is that this kind of service already exists, right? OnLive makes this, and I've experimented with it a couple of times, and there are latency issues and that kind of thing. And I think the big win for this one is that Microsoft believes that it has solved that latency problem, and meaning that you're controlling something and then it transmits and then it finally does it, and you get that kind of lag effect where it doesn't feel very natural when you're playing the game, and so.
Some people thought they were showing this at the company meeting because they wanted to show they could compete with Valve. That now that Valve's talking about Linux a lot, and I don't know if that was the reason for it, but that supposedly was one of the most.
It's something Valve doesn't have, right?
But haven't they said they're going to have it? I think.
Well, no, I meant just as in the sense that it sort of differentiates them from Valve.
Right. Yeah. So, anyways, Rio is something they showed off. And we know it's coming at some point, but no date on that one.
Yeah, it's definitely to compete with that Sony, when Sony bought Gaikai. And that might bring sort of backward compatibility for PS3 games, as you guys have mentioned. Both the PS4 and the Xbox One moved to x86 architecture, basically breaking all backwards compatibility. You're not going to be able to take your disc and pop it in your new console when that comes out. So if Microsoft has their own solution so you can keep playing those Xbox games, or if they could sell you a cheaper box that can basically act as a front end for that with all their media services, I think that'll be really important as time goes on. On top of that, with Smart Glass, if you can have that interaction too, there's a lot of things Microsoft can do with Rio. I'm excited that thing's actually going to exist, assuming it exists in the long run.
Plus, who doesn't want to play Halo 4 again,
Yeah.
Everybody, actually.
Well, if it doesn't work, I could always have the solace of beer. What is the beer pick of the week?
So we have to have a Las Vegas pick for the beer pick of the week, right? So last night, a few of us went to Rira here at Mandalay Bay, which is a Irish bar, but they actually have a few craft beers there, and I had one from Big Dog Brewing called Big Dog's Holy Cow.
Oh, wait, was this IPA thing that you...
It was a pale ale. You hated it. He hated it because he hates bitter and hoppy. But
my mouth still hurts.
Yeah, Paul did not like this one, but I actually thought it was pretty good. I had it on tap at Rira, and it's nice. It's like a good basic pale ale, bitter, hoppy. Paul made a face when he drank it. That's the taste test.
If you know anything about the history of IPA and why this kind of beer exists, it will explain why it's terrible, which is like, good beer doesn't travel well, so let's make this swill that will survive the journey by sea.
Does anyone appreciate the irony that Paul doesn't like bitter drinks? Anybody?
I think that's the ultimate ironic thing.
It's just like my blood type is B positive. It's fantastic. I love this. This is a nice twist. Big Dog, not from DARPA. What was that, Paul?
Be positive.
Yeah, be positive. It's a message from my blood to tell me to be positive and make sure that eventually get some Big Dog. Holy cow! Just a pale ale though. It's not even so. I want to know how bitter it is. I don't see the IBUs here.
The beer from Petaluma was there.
They had Lagunitas IPA on tap there.
Also wouldn't drink that with anyone else's mouth, but it was there.
Okay.
Well then, I see. I see how this is. We'll make sure we get Paul a nice glass of water or something, or some kind of ale for him because he doesn't like the. Actually, maybe a lager. You'd be happy with a lager?
He drinks sours. I've seen him do it.
I drink good beer.
Adventurous.
You're a complex man, Paul.
Yeah.
Sour, not bitter.
Makes more sense, I guess. If people wanted to find,
you think a bitter really sour?
That's it.
Your complexities. Do you share your complex thoughts and musings on the web anywhere, Paul?
Yes, and that was an expert segue, by the way. I'm obviously available on winsupersite.com, which is my main website.
You are?
I am.
That's you.
And you can find me
you. Smiling. I don't recognize that man. There he is.
URROTT on Twitter.
You're Thurrott on Twitter? That's you? Mm-hmm. Are you smiling at that as your avatar as well? Is that why people
No, I usually try to hide my face.
All right, you're always like this.
Yeah, that's what I should do.
How about you, Mary Jo? Where can people find you on the web?
People can find me at allaboutmicrosoft.com on ZDNet and also at Mary Jo Foley on Twitter.
Do you muse on beers on that area, or should people follow you on Untapped, perhaps?
Yes, on Untapped, if you want to follow me, should I do this? I could add 1 million followers.
It's up to you. I'm
Yeah,
not
why
exactly
not?
secretive on
I
Untapped.
say
So.
the more beer drinkers, the merrier. On Untapped, I'm MJ Foley. And I check in a lot of beers there.
Are you a verified OnTap user?
I am not a verified Untapped user, but
This is a constant problem, all the fake Untapped Mary Jo Foleys.
Right.
just MJ Foley, and it's a little cat. If you see that, it's me.
Paul, can you be followed on Untapped?
Yeah, I'm on Untapped as well. And
Good luck finding him. Yeah, you can find him. He'll be
Drinking lots
super
of
happy.
sour but not bitter beer.
I think I believe I'm just the rot on Untapped.
You're just the rot. It's just the rot. And I'm also on Untapped. You'd probably easily find me. This is my last guest hosting bit for a long time. I don't know when the next time I'll be on, but thank you guys for.
Sorry you didn't come to Vegas?
Yes, maybe I'll just show up to Vegas on Friday. I got nothing to do,
Okay.
What the heck? Anyway, thank you guys so much. This has been a really fun 3 weeks. I've enjoyed these discussions, and it's good to know that really very little has changed. I'm still confused about Microsoft stuff, naming conventions in particular. The company is kind of twirling towards some direction. I'm not sure where it is. Maybe not forward, backward, but twirling.
Bumper cars. It's like a game of hover.
Cover.
Exactly, and so they keep floating in the air, and that'll be great. So if you wanted, if you guys were watching, if you want to say, hey, you want to see more Ayaz on your iPod or your Zune or your Windows Phone or whatever, you could always watch Tech News Today or Know How, twit.tv/TNT, twit.tv/KH. Or if you want to watch more Windows Weekly, the old past episodes, want to see a time when Microsoft made sense.
It doesn't go back that far.
No.
Sorry, I had to do that.
We've only been doing this for 7 years.
Twit.tv/WW. You can see the whole archive and listen to the archive of Windows Weekly's episodes with Leo Laporte, who will be back next week hosting the show after his fine vacation, his well-deserved vacation. We record the show around, I want to say 11 o'clock on Thursdays Pacific time, live.
11-ish.
Yeah, so if you go to live.twit.tv, you can watch along with the chat room, and you could ask us questions there for Paul and Mary Jo or on Twitter. Thank you so much for watching Windows Weekly, and we'll see everybody next time.
So going back to the discussion about the clicking, I found footage, but we didn't have a chance to interject it. But we have the first clicking that you guys did live on the show.
Oh, nice.
Oh, right. When we dropped.
Oh, it sounded good. That was good. I heard it. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a snick.
Why is it so light? All right, let's see. There we go. Houston, we're going to dock.
Do it together. Ooh, it snicked.
Do it again.
It's nice.
So that's the touch keyboard docking.
I'm going to let go of it.
And we've now done exactly the same thing that Microsoft did on purpose.
Right.
That is really good.
We've dropped the...
do that.
It didn't crack.
Oh, yeah, it's okay.
Well, you have to do it carefully. It's holding it. She's shaking the... I don't know if that's really something people are going to do a lot of.
It's more like the bobble hand thing where you do it by mistake.
Right.
And then it doesn't fall, and you're like, thank God. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, remember, Ayaz, that's mine.
Well, that's why. Why do you think I'm doing this? This isn't mine.
Nice.